Hello, my quilting friends. Leah Day here with episode 38 of the podcast. And today I'm taking on another great quilting debate. Is polyester thread bad for our quilts? So this is something I get a lot of questions about, a lot of emails about, and comments on YouTube and my blog pretty much every week. And it's one of those things, just like starch, polyester thread can sometimes be seen as evil, something bad that has kind of gotten a bad reputation. So in this episode, I'm going to take that on and talk a little bit more about it and hopefully share a little bit of quilting history along the way. So I hope you're looking forward to this new episode. As far as a few new posts that I've just recently shared, if you'd like to see how to make a total crazy quilt, how I made my orange patchwork scarf, you can come and find a tutorial on that on YouTube. I included a tutorial on piecing Y seams, so definitely go and check that out so you can see how to do it. It was one of those things I realized I have avoided Y seams since I started quilting in 2005. I've really tried to not have to piece Y seams at all. So I'm kind of trying to push myself in that direction a little bit and conquer that. It's a slightly more challenging seam and it's a little bit tricky, but I share a technique with a little bit of glue that I think works pretty good. So definitely go and check out that tutorial. As far as what I'm working on today, I have pulled out my spinning wheel and I am busy spinning up my black fleece that I picked up at the Yarn Festival in Asheville that I went to a couple weeks ago. I've just been feeling a little overextended, just a few too many materials left out hanging around all over the place, and especially with all the Christmas stuff out, we have a lot of things just kind of out and around, and it just feels like I need to put something away. So I'm nearly at the end of spinning up all of this black wool, and then I'm probably going to put my spinning wheel away for a little while and move on to some other projects. And speaking of that, I had to just spend a little bit of time thinking about my priorities. And I realized I didn't have time to work on that magazine article. I talked about that last week. And I had time to put together the article itself. I wrote that, and that felt really, really good. It was just tapping into a much more personal side. It was kind of a craft that was also kind of a healing exercise too. And so that was really fun. What I'll probably end up doing is when I have a little bit more time, I will make that project and I'll make it a YouTube video and I'll put it up. So don't worry, it'll come up eventually. But I just didn't have time to put it together. December, I always like to think I have more time this month, but I never end up having enough time to do everything. So let's see here, what else is going on? I got a few really wonderful comments from last week's post. So last week, episode 37 was with Stephanie Sebbing, and she is an awesome business owner. She has an online business and then opened a physical storefront. And we just talked a lot about that and had a great time chatting about business and how that transition has been working for her. And apparently Stephanie has had kind of a hard time getting good publicity for her store that hasn't reduced it to sound bites. And she actually shared a post on her website, quiltaddictsanonymous.com, and just kind of, it was clear that the last time she was interviewed by like a newspaper person, they really hadn't done a good job of explaining, the businessy side and, the data that she collects and, her actual work as a business owner. And instead it was more like, oh, you've turned a hobby into a passion, into a business. That's so cute. And, so she shared a post and was just really happy with how the interview went and the questions that I asked. And that made me feel really good because I'll be honest, I don't always feel like interviewing is one of my best skill sets. So I feel like I'm still very much learning that skill and learning how to do it properly and ask people good questions. So I got a lot of good comments on that post, and Susie St. James is a commenter on YouTube, and she had quite a lot to say. And one of the things she asked for was to see this Christmas tree project. So I'll just describe it for the audio so that everyone can kind of get a visual on what it looks like. It was a button mosaic, so I started with buttons on canvas, glued them all down, then kind of had a catastrophe with some grout, and then ended up covering it with Peebo ceramic, and Prisme paints. And so now it is very, very different. You can come and see a picture of this in the show notes, but I will bring it up close to the camera so you can see a really nice close-up here. And I love the effect. You can see just the really nice texture and how it catches the light. And I added a lot of glitter paint too. So we've got some gold, glittery paint, some green for the tree. It's a Christmas tree shape, and then white and silver and cream in the background. So it was a fun little project. I enjoyed putting that together, and it's a nice decoration. It kind of served its purpose completely. Now I'm looking at all of the hoop quilts that I have on the wall that I created for the fall and thinking I really need to switch those out and make hoop quilts for Christmas or for the winter time now too. But I think that's going to have to be a project that waits for a little while. I've got a lot of goals, things I want to finish up before Christmas. I'd really love to finish quilting Dream Goddess. She's just kind of been in this stuck state for a year or more now. And I mean, there's just a little bit of quilting left to finish in the sky section of this quilt. So I really just need to knock that out and get it done. Gonna give Dad the whole week after Christmas off, so I think that will be my time. I always get my most enjoyable quilting done that last week of the year. It just kind of feels like an extra week, you know, like a bonus, and I can get everything done before the new year. So I'm really looking forward to that. So the last thing I have to say is just a big, genuine, 100% heartfelt thank you to everyone that pre-ordered a book in November. It was really, really amazing. And Josh and Dad and I have been very busy this past weekend packing all of the books and getting them shipped out. We're almost caught up, and that feels wonderful. So if you pre-ordered a book, thank you, thank you, thank you. You're getting a signed copy from us, and it will be on its way as soon as we can get them all out. And if you did not pre-order a copy but would like to pick up one, you can still order them at leahday.com/walkingfoot. So definitely come and check it out and join us for the 2018 Machine Quilting Party. We're going to kick off the year really with a big bang and start 2 quilts. We're going to start the Rainbow Log Cabin Quilt and Marvelous Mosaic Quilt. So definitely come and check that out. I will be sharing a video on tips on buying fabric and what colors to pick, what fabrics to pick, that kind of thing. That will be coming out on Friday. So definitely be looking forward to that as well. So check out the information about the 2018 Machine Quilting Party at leahday.com/2018party. Okay, I think that's everything. Let's take on this great quilting debate. Is polyester thread evil? Hello, my quilting friends. Leah Day here with a new great quilting debate. Our topic this week is polyester thread really bad for our quilts? Is it evil? This is another thing that has been kind of demonized in the quilting world. There's kind of an anti-polyester campaign, just like there's kind of an anti-starch campaign. If you're interested in the starching thing, definitely go check out our other podcast episode on the great starch debate. It's so funny that we have all of these different things that quilters really have differing opinions about, and sometimes very, very strong opinions about. That's why I take on these debates and really enjoy digging into it, sharing my opinion, and I also try and share a little bit of quilting history along the way, at least what I am aware of and what I know about. So let's start with that. Let's start with the quilting history and talk a little bit about polyester threads and maybe if that's the source for this kind of bad reputation that it's gotten. So the number one thing that I'm told whenever someone asks about polyester thread is they've heard a story that back in the 70s when people got into quilting, they stitched their quilts with polyester thread and it was so strong or so something either too strong or too thick or too something or another, and would cause the fabric, the 100% cotton fabric, to split and break. And that's the number one problem that I've heard about using polyester threads is, oh, it's going to break or shred the cotton fabric of the quilt. So I've never personally seen this happen, and I've never had anyone send me a picture of a quilt that was shredded from using polyester thread. And I personally feel like whenever I hear this story, that sounds a lot like a rumor that has absolutely no basis in reality. And if it did have basis in reality, there's a simple fact, is it's been more than 40 years since that happened. And polyester threads have come a long way. They've significantly improved. Our cotton fabrics have also significantly improved. So this is one of those things that I think is really tricky in the quilting world. And I also feel like it's part of the reason why starch has gotten a bad reputation too, is rumors get started, a certain product or certain material gets slammed, but there's no actual personal experience to back it up. So I've never personally seen polyester thread do anything bad to my quilts. The oldest quilt that I made with polyester thread was 2009, and that quilt still looks just as good as the day I finished quilting it. But obviously it's not 25 years old, it's not 50 years old, and I can't say what it will look like when it's older. But as far as I'm concerned, never had a problem with it, and I've never seen any issues. Now, as far as my own biased opinion about the whole story about polyester thread shredding fabric, I think a lot of this had to do with what materials were available in the 1970s. It's one thing to keep in mind that quilting as a hobby, as a craft, had kind of declined. So there just weren't that many people that were really, really interested in quilting through the 50s and 60s. And then all of a sudden the bicentennial in 1976 came. That was the 200th anniversary of the United States. So that kind of brought about a big resurgence and a big interest in quilting. But there really hadn't been up until that point. So stores weren't really ready for people looking for cotton threads, cotton fabrics, cotton battings. They had polyester fabric and polyester thread and a little bit of cotton fabric, but probably not the best quality. So my ultimate point kind of about the whole history side of it is I wonder about the quality. If it was low quality fabric and it was extremely weird polyester thread, yeah, sure, there could have been something that happened that messed up a few quilts. And then, of course, that was probably more than enough to get the rumor mill started and kind of give polyester thread this bad reputation. So that's my personal opinion as far as where things came from. Now let's talk about why I use it, why I think polyester thread is awesome and not in any way a danger to your quilts. Well, the main reason why I love it is that I know for a fact that I would not be quilting today. I would not have mastered free motion quilting at all if I hadn't started using Isacord. And the main reason is I was experiencing a million thread breaks. So I would stitch for 4 inches and break thread. I'd stitch a little fast and then I'd break thread. I would stitch back over some other stitching or just stitch in place accidentally for a few minutes or a few seconds and I'd break thread. I was using a thicker cotton thread. I even tried some thinner cotton threads. I was experimenting with every type of thread I could find at my local quilt shop and everything broke. And it was so frustrating. At the time, 2008, 2009, I got really into show quilting. I was making these big, elaborate quilts, and I was quilting them very, very densely. And I know that that's not something everybody wants to do, but I think everybody wants to quilt and not break their thread all the time. It's like beating your head against a wall. It's so frustrating. And for me then, because I was show quilting, I felt a need to tie off and bury every single thread tail. So that way they were all secured within the middle layer of the quilt. So imagine how much time that was taking, stitch, a short line of quilting, break thread, have to tie that off, bury it, get started stitching again, break thread again. It just got really old. And at that time I was quilting a huge quilt called Release Your Light. And I was struggling with those thread breaks and was at my local quilt shop, which is a Bernina dealer, and I saw spools of Isacord. And it was just like, well, there's some pretty colors and I like that bright green spool, let me go and see if I can try that out. And I did not even ask the store owner if that was a good idea, because my personal opinion is I don't need somebody else's permission to use a particular material. I'm going to use whatever works. And I think I bought this. I bought, several different spools. I think I got some silk. I got some silk cotton blends. I didn't even care about price. I was just looking for something that worked. I got home, and of all of those spools that I bought that day, Isacord worked. And that's what I've stuck with ever since. You've got to find what works and use it. And for me, I didn't even know that there was a negative opinion about using polyester thread for years afterwards. It wasn't until 2012 when we started the Free Motion Quilt-Along, the very first quilt-along I ever shared, that I started getting lots and lots of questions about, well, isn't polyester thread going to shred your fabric? Isn't it going to ruin your quilt? And I was a little kind of taken aback and a little shocked. I had never even heard of it. I'd never heard the rumor before. And if I had stuck with that cotton thread, I wouldn't have been able to master quilting. It just would not have worked on the machine that I was using at the time. So I think that the ultimate thing is go with your own experience. If somebody tells you a story, consider it that, just like a ghost story. I mean, you don't believe someone that there's like a headless horseman, out in the woods. You don't believe someone that a particular material is off limits or bad unless you yourself have experienced that yourself, right? And I think that you have to always go back with what works and what gives you the quilts and the quilting designs that you want to stitch. I don't quilt quite that densely anymore. I just don't have time to do it anymore, but I've stuck with Isacord simply because it's so reliable and dependable. I get new threads in Quilty Box all the time, and I'll try them out. And 9 times out of 10, I regret whatever I end up stitching them out of. And if I stitch down in anything bigger than a small block and it starts breaking, it just annoys me to no end. Thread breaks are just the worst, And then also it has to do with the look of the thread too. I don't like a super, super thin thread. I want it to show up. I want you to see those stitches that I've sat there and bothered and taken the time to stitch on the quilt. And that's one of the reasons why I think contrasting your thread color is such an important thing to do too. Yes, I'm actually going to say contrast your thread color, make it show up, make it stand out. Because if you can't see it, then it's basically like you're stitching in the dark. And if you can't see it, then you can't really improve what you're doing. And I also challenge you maybe to try this too. Contrast the back of your quilt, because nothing will force you to focus on everything your machine is doing, every sound it makes, every stitch that you take, if you are also thinking about the back of that quilt and that it has to look good too. So ultimately, I think it all comes down to experience. You are absolutely allowed to hate polyester threads, but only after actually trying them on a quilt and washing it and seeing what it looks like when it's done. Only by having real life personal experience with something can you then be able to have an opinion on it that's yours, that's been earned. The thing I'd like to get away from is the rumor mill. It's one thing to hear something from Betty Sue at Quilt Guild, and who knows who she heard it from, and who knows who she heard it from, That's the rumor mill, and there's no reality in rumors. There's no real quilt that we can go back to and see was shredded by polyester thread, if that even ever happened. And sorry, I didn't live back then. I wasn't alive yet. And I know that 40 years or more have passed since that bad polyester thread was being sold to quilters. I do know that the threads that I use and the fabric that I use are high quality and have never had a problem working together. And I love Isacord. I'm going to continue to use it no matter if I get this question asked every single day for the rest of my life. I love it because it's thin and it's strong. I can get an entire spool of 1,000 meters for $6. I love that about it too. And I use this for machine embroidery. I use it for machine quilting on all of my sewing machines, on my sewing machine and now on my long arm too. And I also use this for machine applique. Whenever I'm satin stitching or blanket stitching, I use this for machine applique as well. The only thing I don't use Isacord for is for machine piecing. And the only reason is it's a pretty slippery thread, and my worry would be it would kind of slip if the seams of my fabric were coming together, or let's say I was doing something like strip piecing and needing to cut, then it might be so slippery that those seams would gap a little bit before that they were stitched and secured. So the only thing I don't use Isacord for is machine piecing. So I hope that you've enjoyed this great quilting debate. I know it's a little one-sided. I am obviously a humongous fan of polyester threads, but I also hope that it has encouraged you to go out and try it and get more experience and develop your own opinion. You know, more than anything else, what you need to do is have the experience to back up whatever opinion you have about quilting. So that way you can, talk about it with confidence and feel also that confidence in the quilts that you're creating, in the materials that you're using. So I hope that you would enjoy this great quilting debate. Please share it with your quilting friends. You can share the audio. You can also share the video on YouTube. That helps me out a whole lot. If you'd like to find the show notes with links and pictures, you can find that at leahday.com/podcast. I have links to all of the different show notes to all of the episodes we've shared so far. So definitely go and check that out at leahday.com/podcast. Until next time, let's go quilt.